Can you tell me why would someone think of investing in Sri Lanka?
How fast we bounced back. So that itself, shows that there's a growth story here.
What about the tax implications? 2021 and 22 market crash. How did you manage to weather that storm?
So the caveat is, as long as we are in the IMF program and as long as we don't deviate.
There's so much potential outside as well, especially in the frontier and emerging market. Asking about compounding interest.
So basically your investment grows like every day, even on weekends and holidays. So
when it comes to portfolio management,
essentially it's like a top-down flow of research that we follow from macro, then sectors
to provide you financial independence, to get you ready to be financially free.
So Lahiru, encouraging to see like what you're doing in terms of building financial literacy among especially the expat community.
Hello, welcome to Investigate. Yet again, we have a very interesting episode for you with the Vice President, Ms. Amaya from NDB Wealth, which is the largest asset manager in Sri Lanka. And they hold up to more than 1 billion USD in assets, which is a huge amount compared to the Sri Lankan economy. Hello, Ms. Amaya. How are you?
Hi, Lahiru. How are you?
I'm fine. Welcome to the show. Thank you for sharing your expertise and time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. So to get started, tell me a little bit about NDB Wealth and why should we trust NDB Wealth in any case, and tell me a bit of a background of NDB Wealth if you can.
Yeah. So I will start by giving you an overview of our group first.
Okay.
So NDB Wealth Management, we are a fully owned subsidiary of the NDB Capital Holdings, which is the capital market cluster of the NDB Bank. So the NDB Capital Holdings is a subsidiary in turn of NDB Bank. So under the NDB Capital Holdings Group, we offer, a wide spectrum of capital market solutions, from investment banking, wealth management, which is what we do, stock brokering, and also private equity. So to take you through NDB Wealth Management, so like you said, we are the largest private sector fund management company in Sri Lanka. We manage an asset base of over 340 billion now, which is just over $1 billion. We also manage the largest unit trust fund in the country, which is called the NDB Wealth Money Fund. That has a fund base of 150 billion. So we've been in operation for 33 years now, and this year we opened our first branch actually in Jaffna. So the take-up of that has been quite encouraging, and also now we are looking to expand to other areas, where we are looking to expand to Kandy by the end of the year. So that's basically been our journey over the last 33 years. And to answer your question of maybe say what are our unique selling points, if I may say, we are constantly focused on our clients. Then we are driven by innovation, and we also take an investment approach that is thoroughly backed by research in order to deliver long-term value to our clients.
The product that you are offering, unit trust, where the investor has only a passive role to play, an absolutely passive role, where he transfers the funds and you will manage the funds for that person. And in that context, there are many such funds available in the world. For example, index funds, right? And then you have mutual funds, and then you have unit trust, and you have ETFs. So tell me, what exactly is a unit trust, and does it work similar to a mutual fund, or is it more like an index fund? How does it work?
Yes, so I'll start off by giving an overview in terms of the fund management verticals at NDB Wealth Management. So we have, on one hand, we have the unit trust products offered for the retail type of investors. And then on the other hand, we have something called discretionary portfolio management, which involves institutional and private portfolio management. That is more of a tailored solution offered to some of the larger clients. So on the unit trust side, so like you said, unit trusts can be used interchangeably with mutual funds. So it's a term basically in Sri Lanka, what we use is unit trust, whereas over the world, people are more, familiar with the term mutual funds, which can be more or less used interchangeably.
It's basically a mutual fund. A unit trust
Yes.
is okay.
Yes, yes. So at NDB Wealth, here we offer mainly 8 types of mutual funds. So these mutual funds can be categorized broadly into 3 segments. We have money market unit trust funds, the long-term fixed income funds, and also a stock market fund. So basically what a unit trust means is where we pool money from everyday investors who do not have, the financial know-how or, that knowledge to kind of go and invest directly in the market. So what we do is we pool money from those investors, and that pool of funds is used by the fund manager to invest in a broad range of securities. So just for example, like say if you take a money market fund, that would mean the fund manager would invest in short-term instruments like treasury bills, then short-term fixed deposits, commercial papers, asset-backed securitizations, all short-term instruments in nature, which the everyday investor may not have access to. So, you get that, advantage of size when the fund manager pools so much money and goes and in turn takes that money and invests in, make big investments. So you're able to give a better return to your clients because of that, because of the advantage of scale you have, which, a retail investor will not have. And also so you also get the benefit of professional fund management and diversification. And also these types of benefits are not available to the everyday investor. So you're always able to generate a better return maybe than, your typical bank savings accounts.
All right. So that means a unit trust or a mutual fund, if an investor decides to pour his or her money, they'll have the advantage of professional decision making, and then a lot of, as you said, buying power and leverage, and then diversification that is not usually available for an individual non-professional investor. Okay, so keeping that point in mind, who are eligible to invest in this unit trust? Is it only available for Sri Lankans? Is it also available for foreign investors? Is it available for non-resident Sri Lankans who are citizens of Sri Lanka? Who is actually eligible?
It's eligible for all Sri Lankans, and also even non-resident Sri Lankans can also invest, provided you have that IIA account open.
Okay.
So so as long as you have an IIA account and also a local bank account, what you can do is once those two are set up, maybe for that purpose, you can maybe look at NDB Bank to open both those accounts. And then what you can do is you can download our app and open an account with NDB Wealth. So that's basically what happens if you're abroad. You basically need those two.
What about foreigners?
Foreigners also provide, because the thing is here we need a local bank account. So as long as
they have IIA account, that's fine.
Yeah, IIA account and a local bank account is required. So as long as you can fulfill those two requirements, you're good to
nationality, irrespective of nationality, you can invest.
Yes.
That's cool. And then you also spoke about a separate unit or separate service that you provide for individual investors, which is more tailored, made for like maybe high net worth individuals, or what are the eligibility criteria for that?
Yeah, so to be an institutional investor at NDB Wealth, we require maybe around 250 million, and for a high net worth investor, that would probably be about a 500 million minimum investment size.
This is LKR, Sri Lankan rupees.
Yes.
Keep that in mind if you are a high net worth individual, or if you are an institutional investor, you have that option.
So can I just add that line?
Yeah, no problem.
Yes. Yeah, so on the private wealth management or institutional wealth management, you're assigned a dedicated fund manager and a relationship manager. And on the unit trust side as well, you'll get assigned a relationship manager to look after your portfolio. So if you have any queries, you can route it through your relationship manager. So we
Okay.
always try to have that human touch there, although, now we moved on to our app. So
All right,
we
brilliant.
will
So now
assign.
this mutual fund or unit trust, and
Yes.
people, usually Sri Lankans, and are used to just transfer their money or park their money in fixed deposits. So what is exactly the difference between a FD? I know this could be an obvious question for many people, but it's necessary that I ask this from you. And for example, with the FD, there are short-term FDs, long-term FDs, and there are periods which you have to commit your money to the bank, and there are different rates based on that. Is the unit trust similar in that sense? I mean, a mandatory period, or can you just put the money there and then withdraw money as you like whenever you want? And what about the rates, for example? Like, if you can enlighten us on that.
Yeah, so the beauty of our unit trust fund, especially on the fixed income side, on the money market funds and the long-term, fixed income funds, is that you can invest and withdraw your money at any time you want. So unlike an FD where you invest and lock yourself in, and if in case you want the money early and due to some emergency, you are subject to a penal rate. But there is no such thing when it comes to unit trust. So you can invest and withdraw your money at any time. I would say the only exception would be in terms of growth funds. So because basically growth funds are generally long term in nature, so you need to hold your money for the longer term to see, the long term returns on those funds. So since growth funds are entirely invested in the stock market, what we do is say on our NDB Wealth growth fund, what we would do is we would require you to stay a minimum of at least 1 year, because if not, you will be subject to a 1% penalty if you withdraw beforehand. That's essentially to encourage people, to be in the fund long term, because we take a long term call when we, buy into shares in the stock market.
Yes. Okay, understood. So what about the rates of return? Can you draw a comparison between those two, or like, can you distinguish?
So, shall I, talk about the money market fund offerings first, and just give you
Yeah, we can
like
actually go and break down the different product offerings you have one by one.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so on the money market space, we have three money market funds. One is the money fund, the money plus fund, and
Okay.
the Islamic money plus fund. So,
Okay.
of the money market funds, the money fund is the safest option in terms of our offerings, because this fund basically invests in short term government securities. So, this could be treasury bills, government security repos, and also this invests in high credit quality bank deposits of A minus and above. So that's essentially what the money fund is all about. So it's ideal for those investors, who prefer safety and, who have those daily liquidity requirements and who are looking for capital preservation. So whereas on the money plus fund, it looks at all those investments, but in addition, it also invests in corporate debt instruments on the short end, like fixed deposits, commercial paper. So you're taking more credit risk in the money plus fund, whereas the money fund is more skewed towards government securities. So it's slightly higher risk rating compared to the money fund, but you're able to generate a higher return because you're taking that slightly higher risk on that fund. So between the two funds, I would say the money fund is right now generating about 7.2%, whereas the money plus fund is generating about 7.5%.
We will definitely put a link to these funds and these products. So are these the only two type of funds that you offer at the moment?
Yeah, so on the money market space, we also have the Islamic Money Plus Fund, which is similar to the Money Plus Fund, but obviously all the instruments within the fund are invested in Sharia compliant securities like Mudarba and Wakala deposits. So this fund actually is supervised by a Sharia supervisory board
Okay.
composed of the qualified Islamic finance scholars. So these Sharia supervisory board, they monitor all investments that go through the fund to ensure that it's aligned with the Islamic finance principles, to make sure that we don't go into prohibited sectors, or that we are not generating any interest income. So it's
Okay.
very professionally managed in line with the Sharia principles.
That's an incredible product that you offer as well for our
Yes.
Muslim friends. So when we think about now, you told us that there's a money market fund or funds that are available. And then the other type, main category of product is basically growth funds, right?
Yeah.
So how can you, like, for the average viewer, the money market fund is mostly, you don't use those funds to invest in stocks. It's just mostly focused on debt instruments, government bonds or T-bills, as you said, and it's mostly focused on credit. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. All short-term fixed income instruments. So the maximum maturity we would go is we are subject to regulatory limitations from the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the maximum tenor you can invest in a money fund is 13 months. So basically, that's the maximum duration. So all our instruments fall within that.
So other than the possibility of a credit default risk, right?
Yes,
Usually these returns are quite stable. I mean, unless there's a financial crisis or something like that we saw.
Yeah, although we went through the financial crisis, I mean, nothing happened. I mean, these were as safe could be. So we didn't really.
So even through the most severe financial crisis in Sri Lanka, your fund managed to pull through without, I mean, did you actually have any kind of losses due to that?
No, absolutely not. But the investors were panicked. So we saw quite a bit of people withdrawing money, and we were able to facilitate all of those withdrawals as and when they required. So it was like a tough time, but like we managed to pull through. I mean, we gave all the money back to the investors who wanted, because they're actually quite, distressed, thinking, okay, they might lose their money on.
But other than that, your promise of return, you could sustain, you could keep that return.
Yes.
Okay.
Generally, we forecast a yield as to how much we can reinvest our maturities, and based on that, we come up with a forecast yield as to how much we can, give the client. But of course, we can't. These are not guaranteed returns, because by the regulator, we cannot guarantee returns on any of our unit trusts.
Of course, that's clearly understandable. But there's always an inherent risk in investing in any type of asset, even fixed deposits. If some people might not know this, but even with FDs. So now let's move into the other type of product you have, growth funds, right? Can you explain a little bit more about this thing for us, please?
Yes. So on the stock market side of things, we have two products. One is the growth fund. The other one is the growth and income fund. So the growth fund is a pure equity fund, whereas the growth and income fund is the balanced fund, where it has a mix of equities and fixed income. So I would say, in terms of the growth fund, if we look at the current context in terms of how Sri Lanka's economy is doing, we've recovered quite strong. So both these funds are actually running at an asset allocation of, 90% into equities. So during periods of volatility, what we would do is, on a growth and income fund, which is the balanced fund, the fund manager has the advantage to move between equity and fixed income. Maybe on a growth fund, you don't have that advantage. But what we do in terms of the growth fund is we manage risks by, diversifying across, various sectors. We will use active monitoring, and then we will rebalance our portfolios, if market shifts unexpectedly. So during periods of volatility, what we will do is we will shift our investments, towards more dividend paying, long-term, stocks, so that you have that steady stream of income coming through, even during periods of volatility. So that's basically how we manage the growth fund in terms of diversification. And essentially, on the growth and income fund, like I said before, you have that advantage of asset allocation. So asset allocation call between equity and fixed income, obviously, it depends on the macroeconomic call we take in terms of how we are expecting the economy to perform. So based on that, we will periodically review our macro view or macro strategy.
Forecast, yeah.
Macro forecast. So based on that, we will shift allocations between the growth and the as in equities and fixed income.
Okay, incredible. Now, here, like a lot of questions coming to my mind as an investor. Now, when you come to, I don't know whether this is proprietary information from your side, but at least in general, when it comes to portfolio management, and do you focus, what are the strategies you have? Are you focused on long-term investing, or do you also do a little bit of not day trading exactly, but shorting? Or like, and also, are you focused more on growth stocks, established blue chip companies, or dividend yielding, high dividend yielding companies? How does it work about when it comes to your portfolio management? What are the strategies and yes, methods?
Yeah, so in terms of portfolio management, we, like I said, we take a broad macroeconomic call in terms of where we are expecting the markets to move, and depending on that, we look at our asset allocation strategy. So in terms of equities and fixed income, and then when it comes to equities, what we will do is we will look at what sectors we are bullish on in the market. And then we will narrow down the companies within those sectors as to which companies we need to look at. Like, I mean, we are obviously a long-term fundamental driven investment house. We do not engage in short-term trading, so that we are able to deliver that long-term type of return to our clients, balancing the risk and return aspect of it. Both. So like I said, in periods of volatility, for example, on the share market funds, we will move to more dividend paying stocks that that are able to weather the storm, sort of.
Yes.
So in terms of diversification strategy, I mean, we will follow maybe a broad diversification strategy, but also, like I said, we will look at certain sectors where we are bullish on, and maybe we will overweight on those particular sectors.
Diversification,
so
sorry, over diversification can lead to dilution and dilution of growth. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, for example, based on the current situation in Sri Lanka these days, probably we would overweight ourselves on the banking stocks, the consumer, and construction, based on the macroeconomic trends. So that's basically how we, essentially it's like a top-down flow of research that we follow from macro, then sectors. In each sector, we will drill down into particular stocks. So
companies.
It's a very top-down. Thorough research is being done before investing in a particular stock. So it's always research-driven investment philosophy, basically.
All right, that is reassuring to hear, because certain funds, I don't know whether it's operative in Sri Lanka, but certain funds are more into short-term, like investing and sometimes even day trading, promising huge amounts, which sometimes do not materialize at all, and you will end up losing your money. Asking about compounding interest, how does it work in your fund?
So, for example, when I said the money fund, for example, is offering 720, is that return is an annualized? It's the current yield on the fund. So what happens is the interest income is credited to your account daily. Okay, so basically your investment grows like every day, even on weekends and holidays. So you actually have that visibility and transparency in terms of returns. For example, in a bank savings deposits, maybe you don't have that because interest is credited on a monthly basis, so you don't really see that. Whereas in our funds, in our unit trust funds, or basically any unit trust fund, what happens is interest gets credited to your account daily.
Okay, so it automatically compounds?
I wouldn't exactly call it compounding, but it gets added to your, there's a mix of compounding and, it's a bit of a.
So let's say you put 100,000 euros in one of your growth funds, and let's say you manage to get an annualized return of 10%. So that is basically, then you have 110,000. The next, but without withdrawing the money, you keep the money in the fund. And then in the next year, of course, the 110,000 will increase by 10% or more. So that is basically called compounding. So it's basically you grow the money that you have already grown on top of that. So that phenomena happens in your account as well.
Yes, specifically on the fixed income side, but on the growth and income funds, it basically depends on how the stocks perform within the fund. So it depends on the movements of those stocks. So there's more volatility, obviously, on the stock market funds.
All right.
Whereas you are generally able to see, steadily interest accruing on your money market and long-term fixed income funds.
So in the 2021 and 22 market crash, how did you manage to weather that storm in terms of the growth funds? Were you affected severely, or did you manage to at least get some returns?
Not to say that we didn't, but we took a conscious decision to maybe cut our asset allocations. But at the same time, when we are focusing on equity, asset allocation to equity, we made sure that we were anyway invested in the long-term fundamental type of stocks. So that, although yes, we would see some dip in the funds, but you are generally able to weather that storm in comparison to maybe your broader index, I would say.
Okay, that's good. Because traditionally the view is like if you have selected using fundamental analysis a good company, I mean, it should be able to weather many financial storms unless it has a complete failure of the entire systems around the globe and also the country. So they usually say if the economy crashes, if the stocks prices go down, and if you're so confident about the companies that you have picked, buy more shares. As Sri Lankans, if you do not have a foreign resident card or a residency, it's almost impossible to invest in other countries. Do your unit trust invest in stocks in other countries, for example, emerging markets or even more developed markets such as New York or like let's say Apple, Tesla, BYD?
Like so all our funds across the board in the industry are all locally focused, especially due to regulatory limitations. So strict foreign exchange controls coming in during the economic crisis. So those are yet to be relaxed for us to even actually think about taking money out and investing abroad. So there's quite a bit of restrictions on that fund. So basically all funds are
It's
locally
all focused in Sri Lanka, concentrated Sri Lanka. Okay.
Yes.
I mean,
we're trying to advocate for more flexibility in this space, but yeah, let's see where that
hopefully,
goes.
because there's so much potential outside as well, especially in the frontier and
Absolutely.
emerging markets.
Yeah.
And this is the case even if you are the largest fund manager, like you have the largest funds in the entire country. Even for you, there are foreign exchange restrictions. That's something I expected to be the picture to be different. Maybe institutions such as you would have more access to foreign markets.
No, it's like a broad policy by the government,
Yes.
right? Exchange
Yeah.
control, so applies to everyone across the board. So
Okay.
we have.
I mean, there are no exceptions even for big time players like
No,
NDB Wealth.
no, at least not for the moment. So
Not for the
yeah.
moment. We'll hope that that would be the case so Sri Lankans could explore more markets. Because there are, for example, there are platforms such as interactive brokers. I'm not promoting anything, which I mean, interactive brokers is available for Sri Lankans, but there's a special caveat on that condition where you have to seek central bank approval for investing as an individual to take out the funds. So if unfortunately then if NDB Wealth does not have it, that permission now, I don't think individual investors will also get it. So that is something that we have to wait. Let's see. Can you tell me why would someone think of investing in Sri Lanka? As an experienced fund manager yourself, as the vice president, why do you think I should put my money in Sri Lanka for the next 10 years?
Yes. So you know how we pulled through from the economic crisis in 2022, how fast we bounced back. So that itself, shows that there's a growth story here in play for Sri Lanka. I mean, now if you look at it, our interest rates are down from about 30% we had back to 2-3 years ago. It's now down to single digit levels. So then exchange rate shot up to 400. Now it's stable around 302 levels. And inflation has stabilized from hitting almost 70% levels. We even went into deflation for the last couple of months, and now we are slowly moving out of it. And so the macro fundamentals in the country are now pretty strong, given that we are in the IMF program. And also the caveat is as long as we are in the IMF program and as long as we don't deviate from this, we are in a good path towards, economic growth.
Mm.
So overall, from a macro standpoint, I think this is a great time to invest in Sri Lanka because everything is in place. I mean, maybe previously, some, government would come in, they would, pander to, the voter base, and they would change this and that, and
Of course.
alter.
Yeah, they'll
Yeah,
play
but now,
politics.
yeah, play politics. I mean, now given that you're in this IMF program, I mean, your hands are tied basically. So the moment you move out of it, the funding gets cut off, and you have, you're at the mercy, and you're back to being beggars. So like,
Yeah.
everything is in place now.
Mm.
Back in the day, the central bank would print or any amount of money, but now all of that has been restricted. Basically, you can't do that anymore. So given that everything or the framework is in place, I think this is a great time to come and look at, for our fellow Sri Lankans living abroad to actually look at investing in Sri Lanka.
Yes. As an economist myself, I do agree with some of the points that you made, especially in terms of fiscal policy and also monetary policy. We seem to have a higher degree of planning, foresight, and also discipline. And I have some concerns regarding the legal framework within Sri Lanka. As a lawyer, I don't think it's still investor friendly. I mean, at least in terms of direct FDIs, otherwise foreign direct investments, and also stocks. I think from a point of view of a value investor, I would say it's performing very well. It's on a slight bullish trend right now, but still, if you look at comparatively to other markets around the region, as an international investor as well, I always keep in touch with these price to equity ratios and other fundamental ratios. Sri Lanka is actually doing quite well, and it is a good market to invest. I think this is my personal opinion. And if you want a professional advisory opinion, you can always consult people at NDB Wealth or NDB Securities. They're professional investment advisors. Anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, so like you very correctly pointed out, I mean, it's the red tape that's hindering, foreign investors coming into the country.
Yeah.
So if we can, if the government or the board of investments can get together and, make investing more easy or investor friendly, I think that would be, that would reap great benefits for us to attract, the type of foreign investor we really need in this country. So
Exactly.
yeah, we need to focus on relaxing all of those red tapes.
Also offer an app to manage all your investments in unit trust or whatever the services that you offer. Can you brief me about a little bit about those apps, please?
Yeah, so we have an app called Zap. It's spelled XAPP, where you can find it in the App Store. So this you can use this app essentially, to open your account and get started investing with NDB Wealth. And then what you can do is this was basically a request from our clients. I mean, to eliminate all the paperwork that we've been having over the last few years, because our fund base grew so much over the last few years. So we've now moved into this app, and the take up has been quite encouraging. It's essentially been a game changer where people are able to monitor their portfolios in real time. They're able to view their transaction history. You can also generate portfolio statements. Even you can also generate tax statements through our app, and also balance confirmations for audit and visa purposes. These all can be generated with just one press of a button. So operationally, it has reduced all of the paperwork, and also it has improved client onboarding time now.
Okay.
So yeah,
it's a holistic app from onboarding, management, and also exit. Everything is.
And also to add to it, if anybody is concerned about data, data protection or security or anything in those lines, there's nothing to worry about because there's end-to-end encryption. We have two-factor authentication and even biometric login. So while it provides a lot of convenience to the clients, all the necessary safeguards are built into the app in terms of protecting your data.
Incredible. That's something very valuable for young investors and tech savvy investors and also people in general, because you talked about tax. I know that at least in for equities, there is no capital gain tax. There is, of course, capital gain tax for other types of assets in Sri Lanka, real estate and even bonds. And there's also like withholding taxes for dividends, right? It's automatically deducted. What about the tax implications for unit trust? Is it managed automatically by NDB Wealth, or do we have to manage it individually?
Yeah, so unit trust funds in Sri Lanka are categorized as a pass-through investment. So what happens there, Lahiru, is that this fund or the unit trust doesn't get taxed, but that obligation gets passed on to the investor. So the investor will be taxed on what they earn, and they will pay taxes at their respective tax rate. So it avoids essentially the double taxation of both the fund and the investor being taxed. So that's why the fund essentially will not pay taxes, and it's passed on to the investor.
So the investor has to basically file their tax returns by themselves. Nothing is automatically done by the fund.
No. But of course, at NDB Wealth, we just generate tax statements on behalf of our clients, showing all the sources of income, breaking down your income sources, and also the relationship managers will help you in guiding on how to interpret your income. So that type of support we will provide for the investor.
So in that case, you should have the TIN number.
Yes. I mean, if you're a taxpayer, you have to pay tax. If you're not liable to pay taxes, then you don't have to pay taxes on the interest income you earn on the funds.
And we take note of that when you invest in Sri Lanka, either it's in any type of asset or any type of business, make sure you have your TIN number in place. Okay, otherwise I think it won't be possible even to open these apps and also have access to your services, right? Sri Lanka's future, according to you, looks bright. Anything that you'd like to add at the end before we close this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, ultimate objective is actually to help people achieve financial independence and financial freedom, and build that culture where investing is part of everyday life. So that's essentially our long-term goal as the largest private sector fund management company in Sri Lanka. And it's also, Lahiru, encouraging to see like what you're doing in terms of building financial literacy among especially the expat community. So that's something nice to see, which we do not necessarily see these days. So it's some great work that you are doing as well.
Thank
to
you very much.
encourage, yeah, and also to make people aware of products back home. So
it's actually, thank you very much for that, and I appreciate like it coming from a person like you has so much experience in the field. And I couldn't have put it better. She summarized exactly the goal of Investigate and an international investor. That is to provide you the tools and the knowledge and the expertise from people like Amaya and Danushka and Ada and Shimal and also Nikita. And we'll have more guests on board later on to provide you financial independence, to get you ready to be financially free one day. I mean, it's not that hard. It's just the first step that you have to take. And of course, you have to study a little bit and understand what you're doing. But it's definitely within the realm of possibilities. It's not something supernatural. And many people have achieved it. And it's time for Sri Lankans and also people, Sri Lankans abroad, to achieve it. And this channel is open. It's a global channel. It's not only limited to Sri Lanka, but we are currently focusing on Sri Lanka at the moment, but we will focus on emerging markets in the future and also frontier markets and also on BRIC countries. These are growth economies that we can actually capitalize very fast. Okay, so thank you very much, Ms. Amaya, for joining us. I know you have been very busy. The market is buzzing these days. So again, it has been a pleasure. We hope to see you soon.
thank you for having me. It's certainly been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.